Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for True Detective Season 3, Episode 3. Alright, so we're back for another True Detective episode. This is only the second week of the series runtime here, of course, with HBO airing 2 episodes last week with the premiere. But anyways, we're here with episode 3. To me personally, I feel like, just off the bat, my initial reaction to this episode was a little bit disappointing. I did like some of the things that they were doing. I especially really liked the ending of the episode. But everything kind of in between there was, I just felt they were kind of throwing us a line and then, just throwing like little hooks there and never really paying off anything. Of course, it is the 3rd episode, though. Can't expect too much. Obviously, we're not going to expect the whole case to unravel here in already the 3rd episode. But I did feel like this one, a bit of a step down from the other 2 last week. Anyways, guys, love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Love to discuss with you guys how you're liking the season so far. What do you think of this episode in particular? And I love to hear your guys' theories. This series is especially great for that. Hearing, fans' theories and discussing together. So I would really love to hear your thoughts. And also, of course, if you enjoy this review and some other videos as well, other 2 episodes of True Detective reviews I have up on the channel. So that playlist should hopefully be in the card for this video. But anyways, yeah, so if you enjoy it, leave a like and please consider subscribing to the channel. Alright, so let's get into the recap then of this episode. Then I'll be going over my rating, favorite character, and some more overall thoughts, and also giving you guys my theory right now on who is kind of the leading person in this case as well. So anyways, this episode starts off, and let me tell you, I mean, you talk about the timelines that they've been using through the first 2 episodes. This episode went all the way around. I mean, we saw, I would say, probably about equal amounts of every single timeline in this episode, which is something that I don't think we saw in the first 2. And so, just to, just see all these timelines kind of coming together, is something different. And I just felt like, it's still creating a little bit of a pacing issue at this point. But still, in this episode, I feel like they did a good job on that pacing. I still think the first episode was the worst in that type of pacing. But anyways, so what I do with these reviews, it's 1980s, 1990s, and then 2015. And so that's the way I'm going to categorize things. But I do like going chronological order for these recaps. Just lets me, a little bit easier for me, but also I think a little bit easier to understand while watching the episode. Alright, so Roland West, we start off. And this was a big episode for him, actually quite a lot of focus on him, especially in the 90s, Roland, right? And we have not seen him in 2015 yet, and I'm not sure if we will. Maybe he's already passed by then. I'm not sure, but we do see a lot of him in the 90s. So we start off this episode by him being interviewed by the same guys who just interviewed Wayne, right? About the case being reopened, and now they're kind of, getting everybody together and interviewing everybody to get their statements. And also Roland, obviously a part of that, as he was Wayne's partner in the case. So then he's being interviewed, and then essentially he's now kind of telling the story of the events that we see in 1980, where they had Wayne doing the first 2 episodes. Now it's Roland's perspective a little bit more. So it picks up right where we left off, to be honest. The family's recovering from the letter, or sorry, recovering from receiving the letter, from this person saying that Julie's okay and that she's out there somewhere, something like that, something along those lines. And so then, of course, we see kind of the impact that this has. We saw a little bit of last episode as well, but obviously this is huge news for the father, Mr. Purcell, Mrs. Purcell, right? I mean, this is, a huge thing to get this letter and know that Julie is still alive, or so, does say the letter. So then we transitioned then with a comment from Roland West about Wayne's memory. So we see kind of him commenting on Wayne's memory and saying, there's no problems with his memory or something like that, and no, his memory is really great, as they kind of interrogate him a little bit. And so then while he's commenting that in this deposition, we got 3 timelines all here in the first 5 minutes of the episode. So as he's commenting on his memory, then we switch back to 2015, and we see that Wayne is at the doctor's there with his son Henry, and they're kind of discussing then his actions at the on the street, right at the end of last episode, how he was out in the street there, and it was kind of the kind of the cliffhanger for last episode, right? And he looked horrified because, you know, he's just standing there on the street in his you know, bedrobe, right? And he can't believe his eyes. Right? And so we see him and his son explaining this episode, per se, to the doctor, and telling him about it. And it seems like Wayne, throughout the scene, is a little bit in denial at this point, right? Because he's kind of playing it off like he knew what he was doing. It wasn't that big of a deal. But his son is telling the doctor about, you know, his memory problems and you know, basically expressing his concern for his father. And, of course, the doctor is also getting to that. I did like the way that the doctor then says, something like, we don't know the exact disease, but we have a pretty good idea of what it probably, or what it most likely is, or something along those lines, he says, which I'm guessing would lead to dementia, and so it looks like that is what Wayne has at this point in time, but we don't know for sure, and of course Wayne and his son don't know either, neither does the doctor. So so Wayne basically explains himself. Then he says he went to the house that had to do with the case, and that he knew what he was doing, right? He knew that he was going to the house, or so he says, right? And then his son kind of fills in things, and he's like, yeah, it was that house from that case that he worked in the past. So I was right about that one. That's what I thought it was. I thought it was the Purcell's house that he went to there, and it turns out it was. So he goes to the Purcell house. He's trying to explain to the doctor. Doctor's not really buying it either. And so then the doctor and the son kind of gang up on Wayne a little bit and, you know, say this serious problem, right? And they're trying to address this. And then Wayne just totally defeats the whole thing and says that he'll off himself if they try putting him in a home, or something along those lines. So, pretty harsh, right? But Wayne, you can tell he's so serious here in this scene. You know, he says it a little bit jokingly, but I believe him, you know, the way he says that line. So, obviously, he's still in denial about his memory problems. And, of course, you know, they're a huge problem right now, causing him to rethink and rethink and rethink this case. And that's how we're kind of seeing that through his perspective as well. Anyways, really important scene there going forward with the 2015 stuff, in knowing now he went to the doctors, and we know that he has a significant problem with his memory. So then we transition back to the 1990s. We see Wayne and Amelia sitting outside the Walgreens talking about Julie and how they think she needs help, right? After they just found the fingerprints. And so I'm led to believe that this is either the night of or the next day that Wayne was in that deposition last episode. And so basically, they're sitting outside the Walgreens where this robbery took place, and I love this line by Wayne. I mean, this line was probably the best line of the whole episode, and he says, "When I took it, it was just a case. I didn't know it would be my last." So, a very significant quote here, a very significant line by Wayne, and expressing that, you know, I just took it, it was just a case, and then it ended up being so much more. And that's kind of the theme that has been, you know, they've been pushing the last couple episodes, but I feel like this is the first time they've really cemented that into the viewers. So, really great line there. And obviously, Amelia understands him, too, as she's writing the book. Or she already had written the book, I'm not exactly sure. So, then we get the idea that the case has now created kind of a wedge in Wayne's life again, and so he finds himself at the Walgreens, right, kind of obsessed with this case again, after he thought, you know, he already solved it back in the 80s, and now, again, it's coming back and kind of putting a wedge into his life, and he can't move on until he truly solves it. That's kind of the thing I'm getting from it, is that, you know, he's having so much, you know, trouble and struggling to move on because now it's been reopened, and now Julie's fingerprints are out there, and he feels just obligated to figure this out and kind of get to the bottom of it and really solve the case, which, you know, that they're basically saying that he didn't, right, originally. So then when Amelia offers to talk to the police for information about Julie, of course, Wayne can't get it because he's not part of the department anymore or something like that. Or he's part of it, but he wouldn't be, you know, quasi to that information. And so Amelia offers to talk to the police about it, as she could, of course, pose as the author of her book that she wrote. And so, you know, obviously that would probably work. Yeah. it ends up that she does do it a little bit later in the episode, and we'll touch on that in just a couple moments. But it really does show how devoted she is to him, but also shows that she's very devoted to her own career, and that this is, you know, obviously to help out her husband, but also, I think, to further her career as well, which we see a little bit later in the episode. So now back to the 80s. So Wayne points out to Roland, and this scene, this was the first scene of many, in my opinion, of this episode that just seemed a little forced. Not a lot of organic stuff in this episode. So they're just driving down the road, and Wayne just suddenly points out to Roland that the kids have been lying about their stories. Like he just, you know, found that out now. It seemed a little forced. It seemed like there was kind of a scene in the middle here just missing, that just made this one feel very abrupt. But anyways, it did start a good thing for the rest of the episode. So basically then, right, Wayne says the kids are lying, right? Their stories don't add up. You know, the neighbor kid doesn't corroborate, corroborate the Will story, right? The kid's story, Purcell kid. So Roland tells the guys that too, right? And he's saying, you know, yeah, like that, you know, that way he agrees with Wayne there, and he's saying, you know, yeah, that makes sense, right? That is what happened. And so then tells them that Hayes, like back in the 90s now, and so then he tells the detectives that Hayes was a great detective and he doesn't really deserve their scrutiny of reopening the case, right? And so we're still getting told this from Roland's perspective in the 90s, but he's saying that Hayes is such a good detective, and now with this, you're kind of running him through the dirt, or running him through the mud, right? And, kind of disgracing his reputation after originally solving this. And you see the one guy kind of has some sympathy for him, the other not so much. So then Hayes and West interview the neighbor boy back in the 80s, and he says that they never hung out after school, right? Which totally contradicts the story that Will told, as he told his parents that he was going over there all the time and all this stuff, right? And then they go back to interview Mr. Purcell, the dad, and he thought the same thing. He thought that Will went over there to the house, and apparently not. All this time, he was not going over to the neighbor boy's house, which everyone thought they were, except him and his parents, obviously, the boy's parents. So, anyway, so then they kind of get suspicious again. So they look over the kids' stuff in their room again, where they didn't get quite a good enough look last time. And so they go through it again, and Wayne finds some interesting notes in the girl's bag. And this is very interesting. So, he finds these notes in the girl's bag. Roland finds this little game written in Will's notepad or something like that. So some interesting stuff. And of course, the bag is Hoyt Foods, which comes back a little bit later. And so the main question, though, now is, why did the kids lie? And where were they actually going after school, right? What are they covering up here? And so that's kind of what they're now working towards. And again, it just feels like that whole story and that question is kind of forced. But in the end, it did create a good plot line here, and definitely giving us some more details about the case for sure. So then Amelia goes to talk to the police, as she offered before, to look at Julie's fingerprints, and basically it doesn't turn up that useful. They can't really confirm if she was behind the counter or not. They basically confirm that she was in the cosmetics aisle or something like that, so most likely that she wasn't working there, but they really can't confirm either way. But a very important part of that scene that went by very quick is they also revealed that they weren't able to work the crime scene for that long, or they weren't able to work it properly. That's going to be interesting. I think that's going to play a big part in going forward, because there's got to be a reason for that line in there, right? Where he says, oh, we didn't have much time at the crime scene, or we didn't work it that long, because the store wanted to get open again, or something like that. Seemed like a lame excuse, right? So that line, I think, is key. I think that's going to come back. And so then, so that's got to mean something, right? So then one of the cops offers to take her out to dinner to talk more about it. And of course, Amelia sees right through it, right? She knows what he's doing, but she accepts anyways. And she takes advantage kind of him taking advantage of her. And she was very enthusiastic about the case, and much more enthusiastic than Wayne. We see that a little bit, and then when she comes home from having dinner with the police, Wayne very frustrated with her that she's, that enthusiastic about it again, as it's clearly bothering Wayne, significantly. And so, obviously, they have a little bit of an argument there when she gets home. But ultimately, she didn't really get much from the police. So then Hayes and West go to the Hoyt Foods, right, to look out Another interesting thing in this episode that kind of slid over my head until the very end was that this outreach center put out this basically this flyer for this big reward, and gave them the phone number to call and stuff. And so it just seemed like it kind of actually bogged them down. It did the exact opposite of what they wanted because the reward was so high. So you had everybody calling in. The one woman calls that she saw it in a dream and her dreams always come true or something like that, right? And so with that, now they're getting all these phone calls about false tips, and it's not very helpful. So they go to the Hoyt Foods there and go to this outreach center that's, I guess, a branch of it, and talk to them and ask about why they would put this flyer out. And then they also ask the guy for a list of all the employees that are working at Hoyt Foods. Of course, this is after they find the Hoyt Foods bag in the girl's room, right in Julie's room. But an important part too is that the mom also used to work there. So it's not like the Hoyt Foods just appeared out of nowhere. It was most likely the mom's bag, and she's the one who then gave it to Julie. But they're still suspicious. They're kind of checking out every angle here for sure. Then we go back to the 1990s, and we're back in the deposition, and Wayne says the next move was the state park. And so then we go back to the 80s. And this was kind of a pivotal moment in the middle of the episode here. And so basically the state park shut down except for search parties. So whole park, 2,500 acres of land shut down except for search parties because they really do suspect, especially after finding Will out in the forest, that Julie will be there too. And of course looking for some more clues. So Wayne using his tracking skills, which again comes back. Again, I like the fact that they, introduced him, being a good tracker. They at least explained it a little bit, call him Purple Haze, right? A little nickname there. But again, it did feel a little bit cliche in the fact that, again, he's on his own and he finds the clues. It's just a little bit repetitive. But anyways, uses his tracking skills, stumbles upon some dice on the ground in the forest, which is interesting, right? You don't usually find that. So he picks them up with a little bit of a towel, not to get his fingerprints on them. And then even bigger, next, he finds a bag filled with kids' toys, and it's kind of placed on a rock or something like that, just a bag, filled with toys, and probably filled with Will's toys, right? And so very interesting stuff. Just in the middle of the forest, he finds all these things, right? And so then he finds the girl's hair, or at least a couple strands of the girl's hair, on a rock right behind kind of where that toy, bag of toys are. And then also the biggest part is he finds blood. He finds blood on the rock. So now it's getting serious, right? Now we know that most likely is the girl's hair, and that is blood on the rock. So that means obviously that they were there. Maybe Will was also there because his bag of toys was there, and obviously something happened there. The girl was injured, or hurt in some way that she would start bleeding. So crazy stuff there. A great discovery there in the forest. So then as he walks away from the scene, he finds kind of a hidden house on this huge farm property that's just on the outskirts of the forest there. And so, of course, that's a little suspicious, right? Like, this big property right beside kind of the area where he found all these clues, right? And so he's got to think it's connected. And so then Roland shows up a few minutes later, says that the guy, the farmer there living there, wasn't even on their maps, and that nobody had talked to him yet. So again, building that suspicion. It's like no one's talked to this guy yet. Maybe this could be the answer, right? Maybe this could be the guy. And so anyways, then they go in, of course, to talk to the guy, and he tells them a few things. The farmer tells them that someone was there. Someone was there and talked to him. So another police guy was there, but Roland just said that no one had talked to him yet. So that's an interesting contradiction there. And then he also says that he's seen the kids before on his street walking down, and he's also seen a brown sedan driving around. And he thought it was interesting because it's a new car and it's just been driving around the neighborhood. So he thought that was a little bit strange, and so he shares that with them as well. But overall, it doesn't look like this is the guy, although, he provides some interesting clues. So then, after searching the farmer's property a little bit later, they find more of the angel dolls and also the kids' toys. I'm not sure if these were on the property or in the nearby forest, a little bit on the outskirts, or maybe that is still his property there. But anyway, so they find more of these angel dolls, which of course is a huge focus of episode 1 and 2. And so obviously that means something going forward for sure. And a huge clue there as well. So then, right after that scene, we go back to 2015, and we're back to the interviewing with Hayes. So the interviewer then tells Wayne that the farmer's testimony there was never brought up again, and that brown sedan he mentioned was never in the final police report, though it seemed very suspicious, right? And the way she's talking about it, it's like, yeah, right? You know, that did sound suspicious. Why was that never looked into, right? And so she's basically just asking these questions, kind of poking and prodding, trying to provoke him a little bit to think back onto the case. And, you know, it really is just bringing back that theme of him continuing to double guess himself over and over again, pretty much forever. I mean, his whole life he's going to double guess himself about this single case. And then so then again, he kind of tells the interviewer to leave or whatever. I mean, in the end, I mean, she's just doing her job. She's looking out like a little bit of an antagonist here at this point, but she is just doing her job. She's trying to get to the bottom of it, create this documentary that's interesting. But Wayne, of course, this is triggering things for him in his memory and bringing things back, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing for Wayne, right? And then he even goes to the point where he sees his wife in a little bit of a hallucination sequence that we saw, which I really liked. I thought it was a great part of the episode here, a great scene, and I just really thought these words, "I don't deserve this," was what Wayne was saying. It seemed like a punishment for him that he was seeing his wife again and hearing her talk about the case and, you know, maybe his shortcomings. So yeah, I don't deserve this. So anyways, we're seeing Wayne kind of falling apart here. Now he's hallucinating. He has these memory problems. So things are not looking good for Wayne, and it's all coming back to the case and Amelia. So direct cause there. All right. Then a couple quick things here at the end of the episode. So Roland goes to visit Mr. Purcell in the 90s, still has a relationship with him, kind of interesting to see there, and tells him basically that the fingerprints found mean a lot to him, right? Mr. Purcell says, these fingerprints are huge, right? I mean, you know, and I mean, to me, I thought it was surprising that he supports the reopening of the case, but, you know, I guess don't blame him, right? I mean, it's his daughter. She's still out there now because they found her fingerprints, and that's obviously big news to him. We also find out some other interesting stuff. We find out that he became a drunk and has now only been sober for 5 years, and also that his wife has died, and so he's pretty much the only one left. He's alone. But we do know that he's kind of found God at this point, and him and Roland actually prayed together at the end of that scene. So definitely, I mean, obviously, Mr. Purcell, you know, the dad, huge, you know, effect on him and impact with this case, not only on just Wayne and Roland, but, I mean, like, you see the impact on Wayne. I mean, imagine the dad of the kids, right? So, I mean, it's really hard to fathom, and I love how Roland says, I can only imagine, right? Or I imagine how bad it is, because he really wouldn't know. So just a really tough case all around. So then we see, this was interesting. So then we see Woodard, who's the trash man from last episode, the Native American. And so essentially, it's kind of a weird story. So we see him get beat up by a few dads, I guess, in the neighborhood. They think he's hanging around their kids. So this goes back to the beginning of the series where everyone they asked door to door, said, well, check out this guy. He's kind of weird, rides around on a go-kart, sorry. You know, and so obviously he's a kind of a weird dude, but it doesn't seem like he actually has any malicious intent. It doesn't seem like he's really out there, you know, harming kids. He's just riding around. And anyway, so the dads, they don't buy it, right? They think he's molesting their kids, or at least hanging around too close to them. And so they basically beat him up. They beat him up pretty badly. And so then later in the episode, we see him going back to his place, and he goes into this shed or garage or something, and he grabs this massive bag, and it looks like there's a body inside of it, as he holds kind of the end like it's a head, and the end of the bag like it's feet. And he carries it in his arms out of this shed. And it's like this bag was just stored on the ground. So, you know, what does that mean? I mean, what the hell? That came out of nowhere for me. So, is that Julie? I don't know. I don't think so, but why does he have a body in a bag, right? Like, what? So, anyways, we know something is up with Woodard there, and obviously Wayne and Roland missed that one for sure. So then we see that Hayes, this was kind of the more chilling moment of the episode, if you will, and kind of the cliffhanger here to end things off. So back in the 80s, and Hayes and West are back at their house, and so Hayes just randomly starts going through a picture book. Again, this is where it seems a little bit forced, right? It seems so, he just goes to that shelf, picks out this, this book, and finds this photo. Just seems a little bit forced again. Seems like something in there was a little bit missing. Anyway, so he discovers basically Will in this scrapbook in the same praying pose as he found him when he was dead in that cave in the forest. Really creepy stuff, right? And so one of these pictures, of course, is in the album, right, at their house, and it's just really creepy whether they actually have, they're connected. The dad tells him that it was out of the communion, right, that he was, praying, obviously, and that makes sense, but then why was he in that same pose when he died? And it seems like Hayes is not ready to admit that to the Purcells either. So, he's going to probably keep that from the Purcells, but just kind of a freaky thing there, seeing Will in that same pose. For us viewers and also for Wayne as well. So we'll see if that comes back, and maybe some involved with him in the church. Some along those lines, I don't know. Maybe. So then the last scene, really love this last scene. Roland meets up with Wayne in the 90s for the first time in a while, or at least that's the idea that we get. So it's been definitely a few years, probably since the case, that they've worked together. And so Roland then tells him about his promotion. Wayne doesn't seem too amused about anything that Roland's saying, to be honest. He just does not seem, he doesn't seem too, he doesn't really care. Right? He doesn't really care about, his promotion or anything like that. Makes a little bit of a backhanded comment, about, what did he say? The pigmentation of your skin or something like that. And eventually he apologizes for that. And so he's kind of in a tough place right now. He also says that he's avoiding home. So we already know, right, that Amelia and him are having some issues right now. And especially with his case getting brought up again, that is what's kind of sending Wayne back into this, he's kind of down on himself again, right? And then we see that Roland asks him if he ever thought about being a detective again. That was interesting, right? And so then Roland says that the department wants him to steer the reopening of the Purcell case. Very interesting stuff, right? And so then he asks Hayes, and he nods his head. He says yes. So pretty crazy. Apparently that's yes. He never said yes, but he did nod his head, so I'm guessing that's a yes. And then we see the two walk out together out of the bar there, and it seems like Wayne has joined Roland, and they are now going back on this case with Roland steering the reinvestigation of it. So crazy stuff, right? They're setting up now a parallel investigation of the same case in the 90s, now ongoing with the 80s that we have already been seeing. So really crazy stuff. We're going to be getting 2 investigations now, right? And seeing how both of them unfold going forward. Really great end to the episode, and a really great visual there of them walking out of the bar together. Alright, so for this episode, in terms of our rating, I'm going to give it a 4.3 out of 5. To me, the worst episode so far. Granted, we've only had 3 episodes, but I would say this was the worst episode. Again, some moments just seemed a little bit forced, non-organic. Again, 2 great examples. The very beginning of the episode, where they're just driving around the car, and Wayne points out a huge inconsistency that he just realized. That felt a little forced. And then also when he discovers the, picture book, or the picture album, I should say, at their house, it, again, seems a little bit forced, and it just seems like he just stumbled upon this, but he didn't really stumble upon it. You know what I mean? So that in this, and I didn't feel like that was, present in the other 2 episodes. So I think, it just maybe, lackadaisical writing here, maybe just kind of got a little lazy with stuff, and it just kind of turned out that way, but that's just my opinion. threw a lot of stuff at us towards the end of the episode. Great cliffhanger to go along with the ending here. But I thought the beginning of the episode, like I said off the top here, set up a lot of things. But we didn't get a lot of payoff for all those things that they were trying to do. You know, we got the Hoyt foods in there. We got, you know, Julie Purcell, Amelia going to the police about them. We got the interview, the doctor, like so many different scenes, and we never really got any congruency by the end of the episode with any of them, really, except for kind of the ending where, you know, Roland and Wayne are working together now in the 90s again. So, to me, I mean, again, they throw a lot of stuff at us, and it's great. But except for that kind of cliffhanger to end the episode, I didn't feel like a lot of the stuff was connected. But again, it is episode 3, right? They're not revealing the whole case to us in the 3rd episode. And I did like that they focused more on Amelia and Wayne's relationship. A lot of Amelia in this episode, and kind of, you know, beyond the case a little bit. Also having to do with the case, of course. But also we saw Wayne and his kids, a little scene there at Walmart, and seeing that kind of relationship and seeing more of Wayne's life. Was really nice in this episode, and they did a good job of focusing on that. So that was definitely a positive for this one. All in all, it was a good episode. I enjoyed it. I really love the feel and the tone that they set with this show. The tone so far has been great. Pacing, been an issue to me, but the tone has been solid and consistent throughout these first 3 episodes for sure. Favorite character for this one? I gotta go with Roland West. I haven't focused on him yet, so Stephen Dorff. Wow, he is doing a hell of a job. Honestly, you know, you see Mahershala Ali, all right, he's our big cast, he's our star, and he's given an amazing performance, right? But Stephen Dorff is giving a hell of a performance, too. Now we see him in the 90s, and he gets a little bit more of a focus in this episode. We're kind of getting told this story from his perspective now from this episode. I want to see how much of that goes forward with him and his perspective. Maybe they'll shift back to Wayne again. So obviously, but anyways, really great stuff there, and again, love that last scene of the episode where he goes to the bar to kind of recruit Wayne back to helping him with this reinvestigation. So, yeah, really like Roland West, Stephen Dorff doing some great things. Before this, I think I've heard of him, but I don't think I've ever seen him in anything, you know, big, or I haven't seen anything recent with him in it. But he's doing an amazing job, as well as the rest of the cast. I mean, you know, really great stuff. Scoot McNairy, I might focus on him next week. Man, he is doing a great job. I think his performance is a little underrated right now. Given Mahershala Ali's, you know, amazing performance. So, anyways, guys, that'll just about do it then for this review and recap of True Detective Season 3, Episode 3. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. Again, love to hear your thoughts on this episode and any theories that you have still so far. A lot of stuff going around. Hoyt Foods, we got, you know, maybe the government, you know, a little bit of an inside police job here, because they didn't let them investigate fully at the Walgreens. Tons of stuff coming up in this episode. Woodard, I don't think that can be ignored. So a lot of players here. The cousin did not come up in this episode, so that might be fading in the background. So I'll have to see, you know, what's going on in next week's episode, and try to piece things together a little bit more here. We'll already be halfway through the season by the time next week rolls around. But anyways, guys, again, thank you so much for watching this one. Thank you so much for your support of the channel. Do really appreciate it. And, of course, we'll see you next week then for True Detective Season 3, Episode 4.